Hey everyone, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's been a while since I've made a video in this format. As always, life and everything keeps getting in the way, but we're into the dog days of summer, and still got to catch up with some Calgary Flames off-season news. And the last video that I made, I talked about the biggest story that happened when the Calgary Flames first decided that the Flames and General Manager Brad Treliving decided to part ways, and then a couple weeks later the Calgary Flames did decide to move on from Darryl Sutter as head coach. Made that video up there, but now we'll talk about who is taking place of said general manager and head coach. So before I get into that, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, just make sure you hit like and subscribe, and have my other social media links down in the description below. But I figure in that case, when I made that video, I did it in one video. This case, I'm going to take it in two videos that we had one day where we named a new general manager and the next head coach. So ultimately, I'm going to say the Calgary Flames hired the people's choice to become the head coach, or not the head coach, the next general manager of the Calgary Flames. Don Maloney took over as the president of hockey operations. He was the interim general manager, and it was between him, President John Bean, and the ownership group that Craig Conroy ultimately was named the general manager. And I would say that was my first choice as a fan, thinking on the outside, best candidate for the next job. He's been in the organization, well, you could say he's been around Calgary for over 20 years, other than a couple of years when he was with the Los Angeles Kings as a player. But essentially, after he retired early in 2011, he started off as the special assistant to the general manager, or acting general manager at the time, with Jay Feaster, and then he just worked his way up to become the assistant general manager after when the Flames moved on from Jay Feaster and Brian Burke when he was president of hockey operations, and briefly the general manager. And when Calgary hired Brad Treliving, Craig Conroy ultimately joined the assistant role, and just feel he's worked behind the scenes with drafts and seen how things have been going when it comes to the farm team, the AHL team, collaboration with Brad Pascal, who was another potential candidate that could have been in as general manager. But I'm going to say the people's choice definitely was hired just to put a new, spin, new face on the Calgary Flames with Craig Conroy's, bubbly, easygoing personality. And I feel that this team needs that right now, especially hearing how ugly it got between Brad Treliving and then Darryl Sutter. So that was the first big off-season move. When you're hearing the other candidates that the Calgary Flames consider, Craig Conroy ultimately was the best candidate underneath the organization's nose the whole time. And then you probably could say the next best candidate was Brad Pascal, who has been a bigger role in developing our farm team when it was either in Adirondack or Stockton, or now here in Calgary as the Wranglers. When you hear the other candidates that the Calgary Flames were considering, you had to, still, it didn't hurt to look at several candidates and get some candidates outside the organization to, get their take and input, their ideas, and try to mold that in with the ultimately the management team that got hired. But I'm going to say the biggest known names that the Calgary Flames reportedly were also looking at. I mean, everyone kept saying Eric Tulsky, who is the assistant general manager of the Carolina Hurricanes, was one of the top candidates. He was apparently was considered, but out of the running, as he's working with Don Waddell in the Carolina Hurricanes organization, and they're looking at one of the top contenders. I mean, I think his name was Mike Fujita or something, that was with the Los Angeles Kings, where he was with them, during Dean Lombardi and Darryl Sutter back when they won their Stanley Cups. And the Los Angeles Kings definitely have rebounded so far the last couple of years, being one of the top teams in the Pacific Division under Rob Blake as general manager. That's another thing that you start to see more of a trend, is more younger, recent players coming in as general manager and having success. And then when it comes to non-proven general managers or general managers that have had the role before at other organizations, I'm kind of glad that they went the direction they did, because one name that apparently was considered was Mark Bergevin, who we could say most synonymously he was the general manager of the Montreal Canadiens, and you could say that he was loved and hated at the same time, and I guess that's definitely something the general manager feels more of in a Canadian market. But I'm not too sure. It would have been a little controversial, I would have felt, if the Calgary Flames hired Mark Bergevin, which last I checked, he has now actually joined the brass with the Los Angeles Kings right now. And then another name, which wouldn't be just as simple as interviewing and hiring, was Stan Bowman. Stan Bowman, he was involved with the Chicago Blackhawks when he basically, after Dale Talon was the general manager in 2010, Stan Bowman was the assistant, but then he took over when the team had to dump cap and then rebuild and won a couple more Stanley Cups. Well, you can look up the the story with Chris Beach and the Chicago Blackhawks, where that definitely got messy and withholding information that involved bad things happening to one of their players at the time, and they felt in 2010 they couldn't bring it up to light because it might have wrecked their chances to win the cup. But Stan Bowman, he would have had to get approval from the NHL and Gary Bettman before he would have got considered. So I think that would have been extra work. Trusting that we were trusting Don Maloney and John Bean to make this decision, considering Don Maloney, he has been a general manager and executive in the National Hockey League for well over 30 years, and then being a player even further back with the New York Rangers. And then the one more candidate that they brought in, that eventually they brought in, was considered to be the general manager, and you could probably say he's pretty good that he is with the brass, is Dave Nonis. Yeah, the same Dave Nonis that both worked with the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Vancouver Canucks, so he's definitely a general manager that's been loved to be hated in a Canadian market. And he also spends time on the Anaheim Ducks. I guess maybe that was one of the conditions, because it always seemed like he followed Brian Burke around. Yeah, the Calgary Flames had Brian Burke, but Dave Nonis was considered to become the general manager, but actually he still ultimately joined the brass as an assistant, because if we were going to promote Craig Conroy to become the general manager, we kind of needed another assistant, so that's what we did. So that's all the people that were considered, but ultimately it was the people's choice that brought in. And then time will tell. In a separate video, I'll talk about Craig Conroy's first big transaction he had to make, was who was going to be the next head coach. And then we'll talk about another big transaction that he made in a trade before the draft. And then eventually I guess I'll have to make my draft recap videos. But to get the titles right when it comes to the new brass when it comes to the management. Well, Don Maloney is the president of hockey operations. He started off as a scout and he worked his way up in the organization since 2016-17. I mean, Don Maloney, he did work with the New York Rangers, the New York Islanders, and the Phoenix Coyotes at the time before they got rebranded as the Arizona Coyotes. And actually, that's how he knew Brad Treliving. So Craig Conroy is now the general manager, and time will tell to see how good he's going to be. I mean, it's starting to be a new trend of new general managers. Former players with the organization come in. I mean, I mentioned Rob Blake with the Los Angeles Kings, or how about Danny Briere with the Philadelphia Flyers, or Steve Yzerman worked with the Tampa Bay Lightning, now with the Detroit Red Wings. So that's a couple examples right there. I mean, general managers, is, even though they have a bigger role in terms of personnel that they bring in and player personnel, I mean, the coach has an impact to work with who's on the ice, but general manager is still tricky to say, oh, well, this team hired this person, they're serious to be a contender, which doesn't quite work as immediately, but we're going to see some more younger general managers coming in. I mean, the Lou Lamoriellos and, you know, Jim Rutherfords are still around, but they're definitely getting up there in age. But then I mentioned the said Dave Nonis. He became one of the assistant general managers, but he is also the senior vice president of hockey operations, so he'll also be supporting Don Maloney in his assistant role. And then the Calgary Flames did still keep Brad Pascal. He is now the VP of hockey operations and the assistant general manager. Still say he's going to continue on, you know, working alongside the brass and the Calgary Wranglers. And then we're still keeping Chris Snow, who, you know, Snowy strong because he still has dealing with ALS. They named him the VP of Data Analytics and the assistant general manager. And oh yeah, the Calgary Flames, they hired this Jarome Iginla guy. You might have heard of him. Yeah, the legend, Jarome Iginla. He actually has joined the brass, and he is the special advisor to the general manager. He wasn't named right away when the Calgary Flames named Craig Conroy as the general manager, bringing in Dave Nonis as the assistant and moving around the titles with the current brass. But Jarome Iginla already is committed to the, you know, his rink development. I believe it's called the rink development in Kelowna with the Kelowna Rockets. I believe that's where he is right now, because he got his son Tej to come from the Seattle Thunderbirds, got traded to be closer to home in Kelowna. I know Jarome Iginla is more synonymous with playing for the Kamloops Blazers in the Western Hockey League, but you know, here he lives in Kelowna in the off-season, or he did live in Boston for a couple of years. But he's going to be spending more time with the Rink Academy, at least this upcoming hockey season, with the son. But I think after this season, you're going to see more of Jarome Iginla when it comes to being around the Calgary Flames and the brass. So, interesting thing to see. You know, Craig Conroy, Jarome Iginla back with the Calgary Flames in executive roles. And, you know, the nice one would be if we ever do win a Stanley Cup, maybe we get to see Craig Conroy and Jarome Iginla hoisting the Stanley Cup together. Ideally, we wish it would have happened in 2004, but maybe sometime in the future. But just, you know, put a bow on all of this. What do you think of the Calgary Flames and their move in deciding to name Craig Conroy as the new general manager to replace Brad Treliving? And by the way, Brad Treliving, he is now the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, be interested to see how that goes along, because Kyle Dubas, he moved on from the Toronto Maple Leafs. He, kind of like Brad Treliving here in Calgary, decided to part ways, and then ultimately he has taken over the Pittsburgh Penguins. So, a few general managers have moved around, but we're going with the, you know, former player in the role. I think he is ready to take on. He has been in the Flames organization for over 20 years as a player, and then he has been in the brass with the Calgary Flames in the background since 2011. So as I say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, and I have my other social media links down in the description below. And for other ways you can follow me. So I'm going to say best of luck to Craig Conroy as the general manager of the Calgary Flames, and I'll say, go Flames go, and I'll see you in the next video.